Hey guys, Kaiser here, and welcome to a very special video. We're doing this thing, this Age of Empires group chat. And I've got with me a couple of really special guys, some special guests of the channel, fellow AoE YouTubers. I have, behind door number 1, Jimmy James 59. Jimmy, how you doing today?
Doing all right, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited for this. And our partner behind door number 2, I've got RobbyLAVA. Robbie.
Hello. Good to see you guys. It's great to be on the channel. I'm excited to dive into things.
Oh man, me too. Me too. This has been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Is just reaching out to my fellow, video creators and members of the AoE community and just hang out, talk the game, talk what's going on in the Age of Empires world. And I know I've run into both of your guys' channels separately, and these are some really awesome guys. They put out some great stuff. And so I knew, when I think, Jimmy, I ran into your channel first and then Robbie later. But with both of you, it's like, these guys are awesome. I'd love to hang out and touch base. So it's really great to have you here. My pleasure. So what I want to do first, in case, I suspect that a good number of my audience is probably your audience too. But, maybe not. Maybe one or the other is new to people. And Jimmy, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, who are you? And tell me about your Age of Empires adventure. When did you get into the game? And when did you decide to do an Age of Empires YouTube channel?
Yeah, man. So first of all, yeah, likewise, your channel is, it's been really cool seeing your channel grow, right? And I was actually thinking about the three of us have, I think, channels that are like themed around different concepts as well, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, Jimmy James 59. So I've been making Age of Empires YouTube videos for maybe a year or so. What really got me, well, first of all, like I started playing the game like a lot of people did when I was a kid. And that like I had Age of Empires 1 was like a game that came on like our gateway PC or something. They used to, like, when you get a PC back in the day, you get this stack of CDs that would come with it, you know? And AoE 1 was one of the games. And so I played that. And then like a couple years later, Age of Empires 2 was coming out. So I was like, all right, let me check this out. And I got that and I started playing that. And that was the first game I ever played online, like on the zone and all that. I remember like there was one game that sticks out where like I'd lost all my villagers, but I had this like big, massive. There are the Cav Archers or Mangadai. I don't think when I was a kid I could tell the difference. Like I don't think I understood that.
Right.
And I just remember like being really like I had this like big army, and I just remember like running around the map, like trying to just like bring myself back in the game. And just now I look back on it, I feel like, oh, I was that annoying guy, who had lost, but I just there was no concept. I just didn't have a concept of resigning, I guess, because yeah. And so my channel is like tends to have a focus. It's kind of like a tryhards channel in a way, like for like people who are like intermediate though. So like I do some build orders. I do like tier lists and rankings of things like that. I try to sneak in some top 5 videos, but even the tier lists are largely built around this concept of like, like when you queue up and like you're on the screen and you get that, okay, this is the Civ matchup, right? So you can already start kind of, like thinking about like, okay, like, where are my win conditions going to be? Where is the Civ going to be strong, right? Maybe what things I should look out for. Like you can't pre-plan. We could talk about this, I'm sure, as we get into things, but you can only pre-plan so much at a certain level. But if you know the Civs and you at least know, sometimes it's as important to know what somebody can't do,
right,
as opposed to what they can. And that really is the idea behind the tier list. It's actually a lot more useful, I think. People are like, oh, this Civ should be S tier, A tier. And I'm like, I mean, I think that's a lot less meaningful than trying to sort out like, well, is there an F tier, like a Civ that's just like a no-go whenever, or like, or do you have the D tier Civs? Like those are the ones I actually think are the most important. We can talk about that more, but I do a lot of things where like I think about things in and that kind of layer. And yeah, and some of it's really just kind of paying it forward because, you know, like I watched a lot of channels to improve at the game, and so that was part of it. And also too, just, you know, kind of the fun, it's like a way to learn more about like video editing and things like that as well, which I knew. You go back and like watch my early tier list, and it's just like there's lots of like buzzing in the background, and it's very like it's, you know, it's very like Kmart. So yeah, like, you know, low prices, low quality stuff. So yeah, so no, that's is there anything else I can get into?
That's pretty much exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm sure we could dive into more later on, but
Yeah, of course.
Robbie, what about you? Tell me a little bit about who are you and what's your Age of Empires story?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on the channel, Kaiser. When I found your channel, I was blown away that you cover the stuff that I'm like really interested in terms of the mods and more niche games like Battle for Middle Earth that I don't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
So huge props to you for what you've done. And as Jimmy mentioned, our channels we're all doing very different stuff, but we're all very comparable sizes, and I feel like we kind of grow in parallel together. So it's really, really cool. Wanted to preface with that, but anyways, yeah. My name is RobbyLAVA. I do civilization theory crafting, where I take a look at civilizations and units not yet present in Age of Empires 2 and take a crack at designing a realistic framework for it. Realistic as in historically accurate, not necessarily feasible to add into the game. I'm known to go very overboard in many cases, but my stuff is mostly for the more fun history nerd side of the game rather than the competitive player. I notoriously suck at Age of Empires 2 and probably should not be allowed anywhere near a mangonel. You do that, you're doomed. So, two quick things. First of all, if you hear anything in the background, my son is playing downstairs and I can mute when I'm not talking if it ever becomes a problem. And second of all, there's a thunderstorm rolling in, so if that becomes too loud,
no worries. I mean, I've got every once in a blue moon, I got a train that comes, you know, rolling by, or
then there's a freaking siren that went off earlier.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But anyways, and in terms of how I got into the game, I started playing when I was 6. I played Age of Kings. My cousin introduced me. Got Age of Conquerors like the year after, and I have played it ever since. My mother was very involved in the game early on with me. She was probably the best player I knew in my friend group and could slap anyone.
Yeah.
The only person who could beat a hardest AI at that period. But I was mostly into the game for the history and scenario editor side, the goofier stuff, even early on. I didn't even know you could play online till I was like 17. And then when HD came out, I got very into ranked for a little bit. And then fell out of rank because I suck. So I've really kind of gravitated my content around the creative history side because I'm a tabletop game designer by trade. Call it a trade. And so I try to like bring a game design, a different game design perspective to Age of Empires to try to implement historical fact as realistically as possible without going too overboard to the point where it completely compromises playability. So that's what I do overall. Really, really enjoying it. I started uploading Age of Empires videos about a year and a quarter or so ago, just like off the top of my head. Oh, I thought of this way of putting the Georgians into Age of Empires. Let's see if it does well. And I had been kind of just using YouTube for hobby stuff at the time, but people started really enjoying the Age of Empires stuff. And now it's pretty much all I do on my current channel. So I've really been enjoying it, and I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really, kind of piggybacking off of what you both have said, I really love that I'm able to get the three of us together, get you two together on the channel, because I sort of feel like I've got on my own channel a little bit of Jimmy and a little bit of Robbie.
Yes, you do.
In that, part of me, I love the competitive aspect of AoE 2, even though I am by no means a pro player.
For the record, I love the competitive side. It's really, really cool. I followed it for ages.
Oh, yeah.
I'm certainly not anti-competitive.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not there skill-wise, but I do love like exploring the intricacies of +1 attack and how that completely transforms one civilization versus another. You know, and so that side of things and kind of what I think Jimmy does with the build orders, even though I've never really gone that deep into build orders as you have, Jimmy. I think you're like the build order guy, you know, and kind of that.
I would say shout out to Morley Games, who he has a channel that's much bigger than ours. But Morley is definitely,
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
like, I did a recent build, where like, that was really just like something that, because he's popularized this thing called the Morley Rush, where it's like fast castle
Right.
step lancers,
Right.
And somebody in a recent tournament, I forget which one, it might have been the Grand Melee. I can't remember off the top of my head, but somebody had used it in Nilly, right? German pro player.
Right.
He referenced the Morley Rush, and so I think Morley, really got a kick about that. Now it didn't work that game, which is interesting, and I think Morley did a video analyzing it too. So because he's got that down so much, and so I did a build that was like kind of riffing on off of that, and so he and I have had a go around about that.
That's awesome.
But Morley and then Hamza Krumza, gotta give a big. He doesn't post as much on YouTube now, but he's like a 1900 2K player, one of the strongest US players out there.
Yeah.
And he had some great builds on his channel as well. And I'd also ask Stark, who's a Brazilian pro, like that dude's he has a really underrated YouTube channel as well, I think. But I mean, he is a pro player, so he's definitely out of my.
But that's definitely what I get from kind of your side of things. It's like, all right, there's this competitive element, and I love exploring that, and kind of showcasing on my own channel the player versus player side of things. I find that just fascinating. But then I also have this love for creatives, and that's where I love showcasing mods that are in Age of Empires 2 or Age of Empires 3, or like you mentioned, the Battle for Middle-earth 2, and there's going to be more on the channel. Some projects you may or may not have ever heard of, guys. That's a big thing.
I'm trusting that I won't have heard of it before. That's what you do. So
like and subscribe.
yeah. If you want to see more, right? Yeah, no.
Sell out,
but yeah, I mean, I love those two worlds, and so even though I think we all have our own niches, there's also this element of familiarity, kind of going from one to the other, that I think is really cool. So
absolutely.
Well, you have to have that, actually. I mean, just to jump in, because like what Robbie said earlier, right, is that, like, you can think about a game historically, right, but also, like, it's a game, and, like, you have to think about that gameplay sort of aspect, right? And so like, like, Robbie, you have, like, this, like, game designer experience. And for me, and one of the reasons why I actually think Robbie's videos are really interesting, too,
Thanks, man.
and thinking about, but because, like, because you kind of got me into thinking about, like, civilization overviews kind of stuff, but I think I come at it from like a different approach, in that like my background is more like, I'm a researcher, and like basically like the work I do is, like kind of just like Age of Empires, like conceptually in a nutshell, where it's like what's the relationship between like economic power and military power, right? And so for me, a lot of stuff like the idea of like, all right, well, what does +1 attack get us, or what does 1 extra armor get us? Like, to me, it's just like, like it's just, neoclassical economics, and like, well, what's the power of marginal utility, right? And so that's like the approach that like I come from it, and why like that stuff just that gets me really going.
So I don't spend a lot of time on the channel really talking about myself, so I might as well answer my own question that I put to you guys.
Do it, dude.
That's good.
So like both of you, I've been playing Age of Empires for a long time. That was one of my very first computer games ever. And to this day, like one of my favorites. Started off with the Jewel Disc, the combo, AoE 2 and the Conquerors together, and had an absolute blast with it. I already loved history. And for me, that was probably the biggest thing more than anything, is it felt like I was learning more and appreciating more about history. Not that, later on I had to go back and say, okay, well, this maybe looked a little different, or there's some more nuance than the game introduced, but it helped inspire this love and passion for history in young Kaiser that, growing up, is still with me. I adore history, and this part of in the AoE2 sphere, the AoE sphere, that the modding creativity aspect is people's ability to take these historical figures or historical groups, tribes, nations, and try to capture that spirit or that essence, that time frame, the situations and scenarios that these people found themselves in. How do you take that and gamify it and help light those fires for learning in other people, in the next generation, I love hearing about your mom, Robbie. You know how
Hmm.
that's one of the things I love about Age of Empires. It's this generational aspect and just the
Yep.
longevity
My
of the
son's
game.
playing. You
Yeah,
better believe he's going to be playing.
yeah, exactly. So
It's really funny, right? Like we have a team that we play in tournaments with. Shout out to Team Infinite Odyssey. You know, my boys there. But one of our guys, like his whole family plays, and his mom too, right? You know, is like
Yeah.
like, does your mom, Robbie, have like a particular civ that she goes for?
Spanish.
Spanish. Oh, interesting.
Good choice.
These days,
buddy's
these days she wouldn't say. She'd be like, "Oh, I'm bad. I lost my killer instinct." But she was very good at Spanish back in the day. I also taught my wife to play. Like she doesn't like play anymore, but she can still look at a civilization and be like, "Oh, I know what's going on," you know. So
yeah,
It's awesome.
that's awesome.
yeah, you're right. It's intergenerational, and I heard so many people when the game first came out, they learned with their dad. You know what I mean, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just it's one of those elements that just makes Age of Empires 2 something more. It's not just it's not just a game. I mean, there's a legacy to it that just causes it to persevere. So anyway, I have been gaming for for a long time, for about 20 years now. In AoE 2, and I remember back in the old days having to lug around my laptop and a router and a bunch of wires, stick them in a box, and go over to a friend's house and plug and play. And those early days, trying to deal with the unlocking IP channels and trying to get it to work online, and the thank you Definitive Edition with your and just your online features. I know some of you are like it could be better, maybe some of the browser features, but boy, compared to 20 years ago, yeah,
it's pretty good. Shout out to the devs.
Yeah, shout out to the devs. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Good job.
So my channel started back, I want to say, it was like the start of 2021. Yeah, because it was in late 2020. I had a bunch of friends who maybe played the game single player, or at least familiar with it, could get it or had it, but had never really stepped foot into the competitive environment. They never went online on the ladder or did any PvP. And one of the things that I'm a really big believer in, it's probably maybe one of the guiding ethos of my channel, is that playing strategy game PvP, it's daunting from the outside because you're looking at the pro players doing 10 billion things a second. You think that I could never do that. I'm just not even going to try. But realizing that there is a whole world for PvP at regular people's level and skill set, and it's fun. Diving in and playing with people at your level is fun, and it's so much more fun than just playing against the AI. It's completely transforming. So I really loved that. I had a bunch of friends who had never really stepped into that world, and I thought, well, maybe to help kind of get their feet wet, I'm going to create this tournament for fun with my friends where it'll be, I had 8 of them. We'll just do like a little simple bracket thing and just have these guys go at each other. They're all noobs, and I say that lovingly with no insult intended there at all. They're all noobs. They're all, they've never played before, and that could just be a fun experience to, have them go at each other and see how they improve over the course of, the tournament. So, and I just figured, well, if I'm doing all of this work, why not record it and I'll just upload it somewhere, So, created Iron Kaiser Gaming and just started off by uploading those videos. And it was an amazing time. My buddy and I, my co-caster, we had just an awesome time casting the games. And when the tournament was done, I thought to myself, this was fun. I don't really want to stop. I still love showcasing this game that I love, and I love showcasing how, the fun of learning more about the game and developing that competitive skill set just from ground zero. So I'm just going to keep doing this. And the snowball just started going from there. And now here we are on day 5 of the 5 Days of Kaiser with, at this point, as of this recording, over 600 subscribers. And that just blows my mind. Like, wow, that's
amazing.
Not what I expected when I started the channel way back when. So
great story.
Thank you. Oh, this game has been so big in my life. I met my best friend because of Age of Empires. I mean, it started when I started my undergrad. It's just been with me. I could point to so many different things. When I was dating my now wife, talking Age of Empires, that was one of the things we loved doing. You know, just like with you, Robbie. You know, I've been teaching her how to play, and she's doing amazing. She just hit 900 elo for the first time. You know,
Wow,
a little while back.
that's great.
Yes, it's amazing. So this game is really special to me. So I love that I have this channel and I have you guys on to talk about it.
If you can hear that thunder, that's me. I apologize.
I don't hear anything. I don't know about you guys out there, but
Something it sounded kind of like a bird. It's like the bird. I wonder if it's stuck over your house. Like sometimes the birds get stuck in on Arabia or something like that. You know.
Yeah.
All right. Now I would love to get a little bit more into kind of your stories and a little bit about what you guys do. I definitely don't want to go without highlighting some of the personal projects you two have going on too, because I know there's some really cool things there that people might want to know about. But I figure it's time we dive into some Age of Empires. And I don't know, have you guys seen the most recent the public update preview notes?
Did a video on it. If you want to go to my channel, it's one of my videos actually where I go over it. So yeah, I definitely have.
Okay. I watched your review of it, Kaiser.
Okay, so you've seen at least I put out like instead of going over every last thing, it was like the top 5 things. Well then, Robbie, I'll just start with you.
I saw the Ornlu breakdown too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm wondering is, what do you guys think? I'll just kind of make open-ended question. What do you guys think about the most recent patch notes? How do you feel about it? You like the changes? Anything you think they missed, or kind of what's your reaction there?
All right. So from my perspective, Romans being playable and ranked mandatory. Mm-hmm. The fact that this was even a question is to me ludicrous. Add a civilization, don't let people play it in competitive against each other when that's the main thing the game is about for the most part. I mean, obviously people love single player. No shame on that. Single player is huge. I learned more and more about how much people love single player doing my channel. But it's like 50% of the game. Yeah. You mean that I can't play this new civilization in 50% of the game that should have been in the game since Conquerors? Bug off. That's not okay.
I cannot imagine a world where you start introducing civilizations, say they're only allowed in this little zone and they're not built.
Acceptable.
No, yeah.
And on my channel, this is fairly common. I did a build of the Romans actually about a year before they were released. And it's uncanny how close mine got in a lot of ways, which is great. It was very, very fun. We had a lot of running gags in the comment section. But I've seen on other channels, in my comment section, it's pretty accepted that, Romans deserve to be in the game. Mm-hmm. And since I've seen people say otherwise in other comment sections, just to set the bar straight, if we have Huns in the game, if we have gods in the game, we should have Romans in the game. There are late Romans. Obviously, early Romans would be silly and ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's not Republican Rome. This is not your grandma's Roman Empire, friends.
Right.
This is the Roman Empire at its decline, and therefore it should depict Rome in its decline. That's why I was also happy to see they are removing some of the water focus from Rome. By the end of the empire, from a historical perspective, Rome was nowhere near a master of the Mediterranean. They obviously could raise very large navies. This is something I learned in my build. They totally deserve to have a good dog, right? Mm-hmm. But giving them water-oriented bonuses just does not make sense in comparison to earlier incarnations of Rome when they really were the masters of the sea. So I was glad to see them pivoting away from that, especially because they kind of felt forced to me, at least. I don't know about you guys, but it didn't really feel copacetic with Rome writ large.
It is really nice when they can make a change that simultaneously makes the Civ a little more historical, but then also kind of balances them in. Because I think looking at the original iteration, their water power was maybe the biggest problem. They obviously agree. They think that if anything's OP about old Rome, it's that. And so they made a lot of changes there.
So that's my main reaction to it. Those are my thoughts from my history-focused perspective.
I mean, on the Romans specifically, right? So the other thing about not letting them be playable on ranked is the only place to go queue up and play them is quick play. Because for lobbies, you can get kicked out and stuff. You could queue them up on quick play. Quick play is like a refugee camp for guys with ladder anxiety who are really nervous and people with really bad PCs. And so half of the games first of all, it's a long queue because of that reason, not a lot of people play it, right? And then when you get into a game, half of the games, like, you know, like the little like yellow timer is showing up on the other guy's PC and it's stuttering. And I'm not trying to like dog anybody that plays quick play or has like ladder anxiety, right? Well, like you do you know. But it was hard to experiment with the Romans and get a sense of like, well, are they okay? We're not going to have them be playable and ranked because maybe we're worried that they're overpowered in some way. You know what? Fine, right? But where are you going to play them? Like, how are you going to, like, how's the community supposed to test that? And quick play was about the only way. And it was, you know, I appreciate all the people who let me test Rome against them and who tested Rome against me, right? You know, like the quick play heroes are out there and they and braving those waters and so shout out to them. But it's a rough place to actually try and test out Rome. And they didn't wind up making any changes to them on land except for like maybe like a scorpion thing or something. I don't know.
Centurions now move behind.
Yeah, the Centurions.
Like
yeah,
that.
which is nice, you know. And like it's like, but there's not a lot of changes to them on land, right? So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how they play out. I think I like the design overall because they do have that, you know, like as like the Western Roman Empire was transitioning right to more of a cavalry focus. Like I'm glad that they kept that and didn't try to make this, you know, like a late Roman Republic, early Roman Empire kind of like like just kind of like a maybe like a high quality version of the Goths or something. Like that would have I think been the wrong way to go with it. So I like that they're kind of like a mix of infantry and cavalry, and they're a fun civ to play, I think.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion? It's okay if you don't. Do you have an opinion about Rome in AoE 2? Did that, when you heard that news for the first time, did that strike you like they don't belong in here, or it's fine, or what do you think from an aesthetic point of view or a history side of things? Does that matter?
Well, I mean, I think Robbie makes a lot of. I tend to agree with Robbie a lot on this, and I mean, one, they're in I think the Hun and Goth campaigns, so like they're in the game. So let's tackle it from a different perspective, right? Probably the best argument for keeping them out of the game is this idea, you know, that like, well, like the box said that Rome has fallen,
right?
You know, and hey, like, you know, so it should be like the idea is that the world is up for grabs.
Right.
It's probably the best argument to keep them out of the game. It's like, well, you know, like they're done. But there's a really good channel on YouTube, by the way. This guy, Majorianus, he named his channel after the Emperor Majorian. And he has a whole channel, shout out to him, he has a whole channel all about just Western Rome, pretty much. Wow. And he spends a lot of time like talking about how, like, why Western Rome fell and how it was a bit slower. And also that, you know, like there were a number of times late in the Roman Empire where like they almost brought it back.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the thing. And I look at that and I go like, you know what? I see that and I go, and for the people who like, you know, like I don't touch the campaigns, but there's a ton of great like campaign potential in Western Rome. And I loved the like even like the video when they put out for it. It's like when there are some of us who still believe in Rome, you know?
Yeah.
And like there's this, and like the developers, I think, do a nice job of like pitching the Romans as it's like, hey, these are the guys who were trying to hang on. And this is their story. And so it's kind of like you know, these are like, you know, like in what is it, like in Japanese, like the Ronin, right? Or like the masterless samurai.
Right.
Like that's how I feel about Western Rome in a way. Like they're kind of this like, you know, like Ronin Romans, right? And they're trying to hold on. And so I like them in the game. Plus people, I mean, I know it's really divisive, but when we were taking a look at the Golden Glory mod and there's the Rome at War mod, like everybody's thinking about them. And it's nice to see, especially with Age of Empires 1, they're kind of the bridge between two worlds. So yeah, I dig it, but I can understand why some people think it's out of scope.
Yeah.
You're very kind. I'm far less considerate of other people's opinions there. If I may add a brief,
yeah, please.
very brief thing, something that I've tabled in my own videos before. This is a far future project on my channel that I may be doing. I would love to see an Age of Empires that subdivides the Dark Age era, like 300 to 1000 AD, from the High Medieval era, 1000 to 1600 AD. The fact that we have civilizations from both those eras in game, it's fun, it's cool, I enjoy it. We could get a lot more specific, and we could allow those civilizations to be on much more even footing with each other and depict the dramatic differences in technology between those two eras better if the two were distinct.
Which almost goes into, I know, one of the big themes that I've seen a couple times on your channel, and you even put out a video on this, kind of the difference between sort of ethnic groups versus dynasties.
Yes,
and sort of capturing how granular and how particular do you want to be in your representation of history, which is
precisely
really
just where do you put your line on the spectrum, you know? It's the same thing with the idea of historicity versus gameplay. Do you want to be pure gameplay focused with just coding a history paint, or do you want to be pure history focused and your gameplay is like doo-doo? Like there's where do you fall on that line? And I tend to fall further towards the history side.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me, feeling like I have a lot more of an affinity for the gameplay and like where certain strategies fall off and that kind of thing, because what really interests me about Age of Empires is that it brings together two things that I think are actually important for understanding the concepts of war and strategy in our lives, right? And that one is this tie between economics, right? And having to like think about an economy while you're also making a military, and how that's going to, like the economy that you have is going to determine the kind of military that you're going to have. And the other part of it is this, the imperfect information aspect of Age of Empires, right? That distinguishes it from a game like chess, which is fun and has its own challenges to it, right? But that imperfect information side, I mean, like, strategists, like we all talk about, like fog of war and that kind of thing, and like that's a real thing, that's it's not just like a made up term that Microsoft came up with, right? And so for me, right, it's like Age of Empires is really, for me, it's really mimicking something that is interesting, and that for somebody like me has like an awful lot of utility. It causes me to think about my own work differently, right? And so I don't, which is why like that's why I don't get caught up as much on like the historical side of it, even though like you have to ground that, because, and the reason you have to ground that is because like it's important to me, right? That like the way that the Mongols win in Age of Empires strategically, like maps on to how they won strategically. Like that's the side of it historically that like I go like, yeah, like I get a lot more wrapped around the axle. That was like with when Western Rome, I'm like, okay, man, like you have to have them as like a strong kind of cavalry civ. Like there has to be that element, because like that's the way that their military looked, and the way Western Rome, like, because like Western Roman Empire, like, and they were having a lot of trouble like paying their soldiers. Like they had great armies, but like it was hard to pay them. You're relying a lot on like like foreign troops, and I kind of like how like, and so when I think about the game, I go like, it's great that the Romans miss supplies, because I look at that and I go like, oh, these are guys who are expensive to pay, and I go, yep, it maps on to what we see, and so I go like, cool, like that's. Like it's those, that's where like I get kind of peevish about like the history, is that like I want it to map up in the gameplay in that way.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of my reaction. I guess I was concerned when they first announced the civilization, because you've got the Return of Rome expansion, and it's all about Age of Empires 1, and now we're bringing the Romans in, and I was worried, all right, are we going to see Julius Caesar fighting against El Cid or something like that?
Very dumb.
That would be like, no, don't do that. But I had my fingers crossed. I was hoping, and sure enough, they were aiming for a late Rome. I agree with Jimmy. I think if there is an argument against them, it would be that if you typically define the Middle Ages as Rome is gone. they're fallen, and now what comes in after that, and that would be the starting point for the whole series. But I think you just kind of move that line back just a little bit, and you're looking at Rome, this late stage Rome trying to hang on, or like you said, kind of the survivors hoping if they could bring it back and rebuild this. And if you've already got the Goths, the Huns, certainly. If the Huns are in the game, and to an extent the Goths that they're representing, or the Celts for that matter, another civilization where the Woad Raider is from way out of the medieval timeline.
Don't get me started on the Woad Raider.
So if you got those things in there, Rome definitely.
Dude, don't get me started on the Celts. Actually, right?
Terrible, terrible.
The Celts are a civ that the Celts upset me so much as a civ. It breaks my heart to have hussars and paladins that are so bad, right? And now I know, without spoiling the results of any tournaments, right? Like Celt Paladin is like a meme, and like there is something to be said for being able to surprise your opponent with a unit that, despite the fact that it gets no upgrades, does have like a certain amount of inherent population efficiency. Like, cool, but that's really, really situational, right? And so it just bothers the heck out of me that like we have those upgrades in there, and it's just not a unit that you can really get to. As somebody who likes playing with with like hussars and light cavalry and knight spamming, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. All right.
We have very different reasons for loathing the Celts.
And also too, right? Like, I mean, like some of the light cavalry in that, it's in like the later Middle Ages with, like the border reavers, on the border between Scotland and England, the hobilars and our hobby horses. Man, like some of the best light cav in the world was in that region. And it's just, and the fact that like, like the Gallo glass is such an interesting, historical unit. And it's like, man, like there's just so many things with the Celts that I go like, this civ could be plussed up in a lot of ways. And yet it's been changed very, very little until, recently with the Strongholds tech, which was a pretty bad tech, but it doesn't really change the flavor of the civs.
Which I think would be an amazing conversation sometime. We don't need to get into this right now, but like when you're looking at the legacy civs, the original civs, is trying to figure out to what extent as a developer you can go back and change things. Because there are things, if it were me, like things like calling the Britons, I understand why they did that way back when, but they're really the English. And the Celts are, the medieval Celts are a very different beast than the kind of this ancient Celt tribe that you're trying to capture. But, could you just totally erase those civilizations and put the English in? Or would that be messing with something that's just there's too much legacy there, and you're ruining kind of the history of the game if you make too many changes too quickly or whatever.
Doesn't stop me.
Yeah, exactly.
Kaiser, do you mind if I do a very brief plug? Starting this coming Friday as of when we are recording, I don't know when you're going to put this out.
We are recording this Sunday, the 25th. That'll be relevant in just 1 second.
I see, yeah. So this coming Friday, I'm actually putting out a build that will begin a subdivision of the Celts on my channel. And for the next 3 weeks, I'm doing 3 Celtic adjacent civilizations on my channel. They are my people, and as such, I felt like it was a good way to commemorate my upcoming birthday, as a matter of fact. So that's going to be a thing on the channel. If you guys watching want to see what this maniac would do with the Celts in particular, you
should. They're a lot of fun, and that was not planned, by the way.
No, it was not.
That is just an amazing coincidence. Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That would be it. We got to bookmark that maybe for another time. I would love to talk about that idea. But before we move on from the pup, really quickly, I want to maybe highlight a couple things that I put out on my channel, just get some really quick reactions from both of you. Nerfs to the Franks. The forge bonus going down from 15% to 10%. Feel good about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just like give that bonus to another civ. Like give some other civ 25%, better foragers or something. It's just like, what's the point at this point? So Franks are a Civ, right? Part of the reason Frank Scouts are strong is because you get an eco bonus early with the free farms, and you also get a performance bonus in the Scouts. And so then adding another eco bonus on top of it really makes their Scout Rush a lot harder to deal with. It makes it like top 5. So I don't see it having that much of an impact, which raises the question of, should it even be a bonus to begin with?
Yeah, I remember back before they had that bonus, and they were generally considered to be pretty meh. A good civilization for new players. They got that bonus, and they've been consistently quite good from everything I've seen. Again, I only follow the scene, and I mostly follow it through highlight, recap, tier list sort of stuff, Yeah. But from what I've seen, they've been a strong contender ever since that bonus was added. And I find the Franks to be intensely boring. I do not like their design as a civilization, and I think that get food max cav is not fun. But then again, I am not a competitive player. What I would love to see, if they, I like Jimmy's idea of removing it, and if to prevent them from just tumbling down into oblivion again, they might not, frankly, after people have gotten so used to them. You could just
no pun intended.
Yeah, I noticed that too, yeah.
Yeah, but people, what they could do to make sure they stay good is to keep that free farming, type thing. Just have it apply an age earlier, so they have horse crawler farms in Dark Age. That's going to be quite good without being that strong, and I think it will compensate enough for the lack of the forage bushes to do something.
Maybe. I think that the thing about the Franks right now, they've been consistently very strong, especially at lower elos, for a while now. And I think that even when we're looking at numbers, it's one thing to get them actually balanced, but there's that extra element of having them feel balanced. And I think the Franks are one of those civilizations where even when they are balanced, I think that there's a vibe that comes with them, that they're just so strong because you've got two separate economic bonuses that both empower the Scout Rush play or the Fast Castle Knight play, and kind of that 1-2 punch on the same resource that superpowers this one strategy. And then, of course, if you fight that off, you got the cheap castles, so you get castle draw. But I think I suspect that they are among the most. I think that they are. If anyone were to say this is a frustrating civilization, I think the Franks are pretty high up there. And I think maybe removing that berry bonus and giving them something that's a little more, either like you said, maybe a different farm bonus, or giving them some other bonus and some other field to kind of round them out a little bit, might help the feeling of them maybe being OP or whatever. So either way, I like the nerf. I think we all agree about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's an overpowered Civ.
Annoying is a good way of putting it. It's as a not very good player, it's very demoralizing facing down the Franks and being like, all right, I'm gonna get my butt kicked by scouts in feudal age, and there's nothing I can do about it because I'm not good enough with spearmen to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, right? So Robbie has a great build on his channel for a civilization, right? Concept for the Khazars, right? I also have a Khazars video that I'm gonna put out in actually, that I thought about before, and I think that I think Robbie and I go in some similar but also different directions. And that one of the things that I was thinking about with, as just kind of like a tease, right, is that you take Civ like the Magyars, right? Like the Magyars have no real eco bonus, but they get this strong performance bonus, etc. upon hitting feudal age, right? And so if you gave the Magyars a Dark Age eco bonus, their Scout Rush would be just insane, right? And that's where I think where Franks become kind of tough. It's because you do have this Dark Age eco bonus, though I think their Dark Age eco bonus is mattering a lot less in the builds in the current meta. And the reason I'd say this is because as the gameplay is getting a lot faster, you're seeing a lot more builds. And I should say that I'm a 1400-ish player, right? So that's where I play at. But I see it even at my level where you're seeing a lot of builds where it's 1 villager on berries because they're the slowest collecting resource. And you're seeing a lot more like dumping vills like under the TC to just get all that, and then transitioning to berries later. And so I think for the Franks, it's not so much like the whole like getting the faster uptime, which was a big thing for them. I think it's less that now and more that it is having the faster berries is buffing their mid game a bit more. And so it's kind of feels like you're having like these two really strong mid-game bonuses with the extra food in the farms, which doesn't really pay off till later. But that's what makes the Frank such a flexible civ to play with, because if you want to open like Men-at-Arms Archers with Franks, it's a great opening. And then if you want to Knight switch in Castle Age and get that really powerful like crossbow Knight army, well, you don't have to pay for bloodlines. Your farms are already going to last, so you don't need to worry about that. And you can make that transition really easy. And like that's where I think Franks get really hard to deal with, is that like in that mid game, if they can get to like a Knight crossbow army, there's a few civs that can do that pretty well, especially now that crossbows are more expensive. Portuguese, right? Like Portuguese get the Dark Age eco bonus, right? And all of a sudden, like, oh, man, they're like off to the races. And it's like, how can this small bonus enable that? It's like, well, they don't really have that hole early on that they used to. And maybe Franks, right, getting rid of the forage bushes, I think would create a hole, and I think you'd have to compensate for them in some way, but maybe not something that is like a Dark Age eco bonus, right? Or something maybe that happens on Feudal Age. I don't know. I mean, something along those lines. It could be worked on.
Really good analysis, man. Just thinking off the top of my head, farm upgrade, starting in Feudal Age, farm upgrades, and your first farm you build is free, maybe?
It's not bad. I mean, yeah. It's not a bad idea. Or even something like the Slavs team bonus, where you have the military buildings like providing pop space. Maybe with Franks, right? Like economic, like buildings providing pop space or something, right? And so you get some free houses or something. You save like a little bit of wood, something like that would have a decent impact, but not not let them go like 18 pop scouts with scouts that then have like 20% more HP than yours. And now you're in a tough spot, right? So
yeah.
I like it. All right, number 2. Chinese getting nerfed. It used to be 10, 15, 20% tech discount through the ages. Now it's 5, 10, 15% discount. So 5% off of their tech discount bonus.
You go first, Jimmy. You're the pro here.
Far from that, but I mean, like, it's a civ with a triple it's got a triple eco bonus. Like the Chinese start, people have down now, and the thing with that bonus is that it's so flexible. So I just put out a video on my top 5 balance changes that I want to see happen. I talk a little bit about this in that video. The thing with Chinese, right, is that normally in the game, there is this distinction, right, between the openness of a tech tree and how many like civ bonuses you have, right? So, the fact that like Chinese have 3 eco bonuses and then they have this great technology tree, and they can go for anything a little bit cheaper, right? I mean, the fact that heavy cavalry archers with Chinese, like Chinese have better heavy cavalry archers really than like Hindustanis, which like historically, right? I mean, because they're the same in terms of upgrades, but Chinese get everything so much cheaper. And when you're making cav archers, like it's an insanely expensive unit to upgrade, right? So the fact, right, that like it bothers me to no end that like the Chinese cav archers are like better than Hindustanis, or like Hindustanis in game represent like the Ghaznavid dynasty and the Gurids. Like these were like the horse lords of Central Asia. Right. And now one way you could go is okay, maybe Hindustani cav archers need a buff and that's fine. But it's so flexible with the Chinese. I think that in terms of the proportions, right, like you're still going to get 15% cheaper techs in Imperial Age. So that's not where you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it early on in Feudal Age, because going from like 10% to 5%, that's marginally speaking, it's a major reduction. And you see what happens when like the Hindustani villager discount gets nerfed by a pretty similar kind of margin there. And now Hindustanis, right, are, like nobody considers them top tier. People see them as underperforming. And I mean, they've been nerfed in a lot of other ways too. So it may be hard to say, right, if you gave them their previous technology tree. So I think it's going to matter, but at the end of the day, though, you're still going to be up 2 villagers, or at least 1, right? Usually it's like 1 at my elo because the start's not like that far down, and you're going to have the extra food on the farms, so those are going to last a bit longer, and you still have, whatever unit your mind can dream up making, you can make it with the Chinese. So I think it's still going to be a really strong civilization, and I think in late game you're not going to feel it as much.
Good deal.
Wow, what an analysis, man. Yeah, for me, I hate seeing nerfs that make civilizations more generic.
Mhm.
I very much disliked when they tried to make the Chinese start less intense. Because I like intense. I like even if I'm not by any means a competitive player, it's really, really cool seeing when civilizations have their boundaries pushed. And so I tend to favor dramatic design. If the technology, you make a lot of sense though when you say, frankly, in Age of Empires, having designed a lot of custom civilizations and gotten a lot of feedback on them, the more economic bonuses you give a civilization, in general, the better they will be. With some exceptions, but not many. And the Chinese have 3 good ones, and that's going to bias the civilization an awful lot. I think that one cool way to get around this, and this is something I've proposed on my channel, and something I might try to do further with my own builds, is to, in addition to having civilization bonuses, have civilization penalties, where it is something a civilization is specifically bad at. And a commenter, shout out to Irasange, he had this fantastic idea in my Discord server. He's like, what if you made the Chinese start like better in some ways, like they don't get as heavily penalized in how much food they lose, but they have a unique civilization penalty where loom costs twice as much. And that way or like takes twice as long to research. And that way you're down a vil when you get loom. So you're trying to put off loom as long as you can. And that's where the extra little incremental value can be gained. And frankly, does anyone care about them getting extra HP on their heavy demo ships? Has that ever been relevant in the history of the universe? Because my guess is probably not.
Right.
And if so, just get rid of that stupid thing and keep their start cool and interesting, and put a penalty in its place that can allow the Chinese to have some actual trade-off to compensate for how unbelievably good their tech tree is. I'm not saying that's the only way you could do it, but it's one way you could do it.
I actually have a question on that, Robbie, because I've noticed that one of the things I think is so unique about the way that you see the civilizations is that, like, you do introduce a lot of like penalties where it's, like, well, you can do this, but this is going to be this is going to be diminished, right? Maybe for a certain amount of time or whatever. And I wanted to ask you, right? Like, why do you think in Age of Empires we don't see a lot of civilization penalties? Like, other than like limiting the tech tree, we really don't see that.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, I think it's cultural. One of the games that I was most involved in, you guys may have as well, growing up, was Magic the Gathering. I played a lot of that. And in Magic the Gathering, there are a lot of effects that you penalize yourself or you interfere directly with your opponent. I love interfering mechanics on my builds. Like, for example, I have a build, the Purepecha, you might know them as the Tarascans, where they have a mechanic where upon aging up, you steal the first blank number of resources your opponent gathers. It goes straight into your stockpile instead of theirs. And a couple people in the comment section were like, that sounds like the worst thing in the world. Why would you? And I was like, I'm a Magic the Gathering player. We are a pain to each other all the time. And I think it's a cultural thing. That's like the expectation that the game brings to you. And in RTSs, I have found that there's a lot less, in general, direct interference with your opponent's side of the game. And also, when you are choosing a civilization to play in an RTS, you're not usually choosing one that's going to penalize yourself. Like, you'd have to have a really nice incentive. And because that, you can get kind of sneaky when you're doing penalties. Like, make a civilization quite good in many ways, and then have a penalty that scares people away and might make them like undersell how good the rest of the civilization is because they have this built-in downside. I think it's really underused design space. And I think, from my perspective, from what I see, the main thing holding it back is the cultural expectation of the game and the genre writ large. But that sort of thing can be overwritten, especially if you are determined enough.
So The thing that I had thought about, right, is maybe the reason why you don't see it is that I wonder if it would create civilization matchups that would get too imbalanced. Where like if you had a civilization that had a civ bonus, right? Because if two civilizations start off here, right? We have a civ that gets a bonus here, but then you wind up in a matchup with a civ that's getting penalized here. Do we create like, does that create like from the jump so much of a distance, right? That the win condition becomes maybe like a little too obvious, or does it start creating like civ wins? That was the only, I mean, that
Yeah,
was the only reason I could think of, because when thinking about the tech tree, like tech trees do that, where like, like Goths versus Mayans on a map like Arena is like a really tough matchup for Mayans, right? Because they have these like tech tree gaps in their infantry, and you don't have stables, and you lack like bombard cannons, right? Like Huskarls just seem perfectly designed to deal with them, right? And so it's like, okay, maybe on a map like Arabia, right? Mayan Eco can you can raid, right? You can do other things, but on like a map like Arena, it's a pretty tough matchup, I think. Where for the Mayan player, your win conditions, you can still win with the Mayans, obviously, but it feels like your win conditions are much more
yeah,
constrained. And so you can see it happen with the tech trees. And so, but I think though that like it probably depends on like, like what a civ penalty would even be, right? Like maybe because I think the idea is really interesting. Like, I mean, like the Huns notably, right? Like you can reduce your opponent's relic gold, right? And I think that mechanic is really cool. I thought, like, I remember seeing that. I was a little familiar with your channel, I think, at the time. And I was like, that's a Robbie change, because like,
yeah, it was.
like, because it's taking away, and like, but I like it. I mean, personally, I wish that technology gave you some of your opponent's relic gold. That's just me, and I still don't think that tech is good enough. But whatever.
Yep, I would have taken
Um,
it further for sure.
yeah, I definitely
Yeah,
go further with it. But yeah, I don't know. It would be
it's a
it'd be
really
cool to
interesting point. Can I give a quick response to that? I don't.
please.
If we're
Go ahead.
stuck on this one too
Go
much, it's
ahead.
fine.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a situation where a civilization penalty is that skirmishers cost 10 more wood or something like that. It's a pretty big penalty. That means as soon as you're in an archer matchup, you're at a substantial disadvantage. How do you overcome that? I think the way you overcome that is in a more fundamental element of game design, which is building redundancy into tech trees from default.
Mm,
My favorite example of this is imagine a civilization that is limited to spearmen. They can't get pikes, but they also don't have camels. Is that feasible? I don't think that would ever possibly work in game. To me, that is dumb. Like, I would like to see more units in game that have counter niches against common unit types. Why do we only have two anti-cavalry units, one of which is only gotten by less than half of civilizations? Silly. Like, there are so many historical units that were specialized against cavalry. Um, and so to me, it's a matter of expanding the technology tree such that you can selectively remove strengths and weaknesses without crippling someone's ability in certain matchups. Assuming, of course, that all of these individual counter units have different gameplay approaches, different strengths and weaknesses of their own, make them all nice and lovely and unique. And so that way, that civilization that says, "Oh, your skirmishers are more expensive as their penalty," they're like, "Okay, I'm probably not going to do the skirms unless I'm doing some like Spanish archer rush thing and trying to screw up my opponent. I'm going to go with one of the other couple of anti-archer options that I have, unless I'm getting too predictable to my opponent." That's how I think you go about addressing like those sort of lopsided civ matchups. But for something like the Chinese one I proposed, that this commenter suggested to me, Loom, twice expensive, takes double the research time. That one's more innately countered by your map and your rush ability. And so it means that if you're on a map and you're against a civilization that you know is going to do like some really early rush play, you're on Arabia, you say, okay, I'm probably just going to have to bite the bullet, pick up Loom, and now my villager advantage is much smaller than it would have been otherwise. And I think that's fine. I think it's okay that certain civilizations are better on certain maps and versus certain other civilizations. I think my range of tolerance is 75-25. If a matchup is more dramatic than that, maybe not. But other than that, I think it's usually acceptable.
It's an interesting thing to imagine because I think you even see, like with the Chinese bonus you're talking about, you almost see something like that. I remember when the polls were first released, And the idea of the full work. It's like, oh, this is really great. You get a bunch of, food right out of the gate. Amazing eco bonus. But tied in with that, if you were going to take advantage of it early on, it meant that your vills, your farmers were much more likely, they were exposed. It's much easier to raid them. And so there was kind of a built-in malice or a penalty, a concern there if you took advantage of that bonus. And so I think you definitely see hints of that already in the game, and there's a lot of design space that you could get into with something like what you're talking about. It's pretty cool. All right, for the sake of time, I won't go through every other bonus I meant in my video. I just want to ask one more question about some of the tweaks and changes, and that's with the battering ram. Where they've been changed now to where they're going to move as fast as siege rams currently do, and they get 6 population space. So what I am wondering, what I'm hoping for, because in my opinion, and I play about 1200 elo ish at the moment. So in my experience, Castle Age battering rams are not that good. And to back me up, I remember Hera the other day putting out a video where he said the same thing. It's like Castle Age battering rams are kind of a meme, he said. They're too easily knocked out, and they don't really do their job well enough. Do you think between faster moving rams and then the population space, which means they can move, with every infantry you put in, they move faster and they do more damage, do those two changes combined push battering rams over the edge to viable in the Castle Age? What do you think?
You go first, Jimmy. You can answer the specific question much better. I have a tangent.
I don't think it matters that much, honestly. I mean, I think it makes a unit that was not all that great to one that's kind of like meh. I think the real thing, if you want to make rams more viable, I think you want to reduce the bonus damage that they take from like mangonels, or maybe take them from like -3 melee armor to like -2 or -1, right? Because that's right. Like you take so much, they're not that battering rams are not that hard to kill. Cat rams are not that hard to kill. Even siege rams are kind of interesting, I think. But that's probably only too because when you get to siege ram, it's at a stage in the game where they have a lot more units supporting the ram push than usually you can like afford in Castle Age. So, and that's one of the problems. Like it kind of feels like given the state of your economy in Castle Age, sometimes you're kind of like naked ram pushing, or it's just like I think it's too easily countered. You could kill it too easily at this point. The speed will help close the distance a little bit, I suppose, but so it's not a bad change by any means. But it's I don't think it's gonna make them like we're not gonna see. I don't think we're gonna see videos where it's like battering rams are insane or anything like that.
Mental note: create new video. Battering rams.
Yeah, I can't speak to it from a competitive perspective, but from a theory crafting perspective, I think it's not a great direction. Like when you think about a lumbering wooden behemoth used to take down walls, I don't think fast. Nor do I think Lamborghini. Why are we letting them tote around more guys to get even faster? I think a more interesting direction from my perspective that would have, from historical, like a history pedant's perspective, been a little more on the money, would be to make them cheaper. The fact that they cost as much gold as a knight and as much wood as a barracks is silly. And I think that toning down their price and making them the more expendable siege makes a lot of sense historically. They were like quite common, and it wasn't the absolute end of the world to lose one. Would be quite interesting. And if it proved too oppressive, especially once you got siege rams, increase the upgrade cost for siege ram.
It does add to the niche in the Siege Workshop where mangoes are pretty expensive, and then scorpions, and then having battering rams is kind of the cheap option.
Yeah,
I guess petards are cheap, but
petards don't count.
Right.
Yeah, those come from a castle, anyways. It's kind of a different unit.
Yeah.
And so I feel like making them cheaper, I would be okay with making them slower, even if they were quite nice and cheap. I think that could be interesting.
Throw at your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to, I think increasing HP could work. I kind of like the low melee armor niche myself because it makes sense that you like send out you sally forth, whack them apart, and then run back. That makes sense. But making them even more resistant to arrow fire by just increasing the HP, that makes sense to me too. But again, I feel like the speed, that's probably the last thing I would have touched, just because it makes sense that they're slow. I that's pretty much the end of where my thought process goes.
Cool. I love it. All right. I have got when I kind of booted up this morning and was planning this whole conversation, there's some Age of Empires news that's come out, and I don't know if you guys have heard this. So
No,
I might be dropping this on you guys for the first time, and I want to get your feedback. All right. So off the cuff reactions. Booted up Reddit, and there was a thread linking to a forum post. A tip of the hat to X White Wolf X, who put out this post saying, I'm going to just read it to you. So I just went through the new and changed files in the pup when I stumbled across a folder called Palm. There I found lots of new UI layout files for an Age Pass screen, which appears to be something like a battle pass. I went through the files and found the following information. There seem to be seasons with 4 ages: Dark, Feudal, Castle, and Imperial Age. You can collect XP and level up by completing challenges. Challenges have a time limit, whether that's daily challenges or every challenge, right? I don't know. You can collect age points, which you probably need to unlock the next age and items. There will be unlockable items per season, per age, which can be equipped, whatever that means. You will be able to set modifiers to increase your gained XP and or age points. You can sort the items by civilization, so maybe these items are Civ specific, like skins possibly. There's an example code to equip an item to a scout cavalry, which also hints toward possibly a skin, something you're unlocking in a battle pass to change the look of a scout cav or something like that, right? And then there's a group of interesting strings he found, things like, let me see, I think maybe the most relevant one here, I want to highlight this in particular. Congratulations on finishing Season 3. Access previous seasons to unlock their rewards. All right, I think, and that might be the most relevant of them all, for me anyway, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I kind of want to get your reaction. This is obviously something that they're considering, they're starting to maybe implement or put in the game, this idea of a battle pass. What do you guys think about what I just shared? And maybe more broadly, too, how do you expand, if you react negatively, I don't know, you guys tell me. But if you don't like that, or if you do like that or whatever, how do you see expanding the monetization of Age of Empires? Where do you grow the game from there beyond just releasing more DLC? What do you guys? And Robbie, let me go to you first, if you don't mind. I'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Jimmy.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a number of thoughts on this. First thought: if it's purely cosmetic, zero issue. People can spend money on cosmetics all they want. I never will spend a cent on it. That's my policy. I think there is. Let me do the charitable version first. If this ends up being what I'm about to say, I will not only say it's good, I will welcome, encourage, and maybe even buy it. If this gives us regional unit skins as well as regional building skins, I will be thrilled. This has been a recurring theme on my channel for a long time. It's something I talked about with people in comments for a long time. And always the issue has been, that's a lot of dev time. That's a lot of hours for your sprite workers. Pay them with this. Pay them with a battle pass. Go for it. That would be great. Frankly, if this lets us, if this works and people actually go with this regional unit skin, you could do my ultimate dreams of the game: civilization specific building and unit skins for everything. And then you can buy into whatever level of aesthetics you want, and you have a little button that lets you turn off all people's skins if you want to play the game vanilla. Beautiful. Perfect. I'm not sure it's going to be that. I'd like it to be that. I think it has a chance to be that. If anyone who has any say is watching, make it that. If not, I have a fly swatter, and I'm not afraid to use it. What I think it's probably going to end up being is it's going to lead to civilizations locked behind a battle pass. I really don't want it to be that. I think that would be a disaster. But I think that's what they're going to lead it to. I was hopeful for Return of Rome. I still would argue it has potential, but I was very disappointed and made my disappointment abundantly known. Because to me, it seemed like a cash grab that will not improve the longevity of the game. I'm 100% okay with cash grabs that improve the longevity of the game. There are not many of them, but they do exist. And for monetization going forward, I think that's something along the lines of saying, hey, buy in to this civilization-specific skin pack for all units and buildings. You get to pick whichever civilization you want. It's $5. I'd pay 10 for certain civilizations. I'd pay $10 to have Persian-specific unit and building skins. And not only that, imagine all the new assets that offers modders in the game to make custom units and buildings. Beautiful, glorious future that has the potential to exist. I'm not sure it will happen. That's what I would like, though.
I definitely have my thoughts, but Jimmy, do you have anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, I still don't really kind of understand it. But I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb. But it does. I mean, speaking of Robbie's, like I love the idea of Civ skins, and I think that that would give the game a fresh coat of paint without like changing the car. And I think that the car, like it's a good car, right? And the car, I think the car is, it has its issues, like the pathing, things like that. We take it into the shop, etc. But it's still a good car and worth driving. And so, and I think you have to kind of, not to torture the metaphor, but you need to kind of understand what kind of car you're driving, right? You don't, like you don't put, like, I don't know, like, like fins or racing gear or something, on like your Subaru Outback, right? Like, I mean, you need to understand, and that's important in Age of Empires, where, like, I mean, one of the great things about Age of Empires is that, like, games are kind of like tennis shoes, in that, like tennis shoes, like NBA player tennis shoes are like really expensive, like exorbitantly expensive. And there's a lot of games out there that cost incredible amounts of money that, that, like, in both cases, the target audience are a demographic that may not, like, have a lot of money in many cases. Age of Empires audience is a little bit older, so I think that's not as big of an issue. But the point, though, is that, like, Age of Empires is a game for the amount of return you get on that investment, right? It's really high, right? Because there's not a lot of paywalls. There's not, there's not like a monthly subscription or anything like that. So I would say that anything that starts to move the game away from that, like really high ROI model, because we don't mind paying for DLCs because we're getting something new. I wouldn't mind paying for a Civ reskin, even, like, because I'm getting something new, and I'm not affecting other people's ability to play the game, because, like, hey, turn off, those mods, whatever, like, I mean, we all have mods to the game. So, but anything that starts to go in the other direction of that, I think is that's going to be I don't know where that leads exactly. It might not be where we want to go.
Yeah. If I may summarize briefly, allow people to buy into the game to the degree that they want. Do not make them buy into it more or less than they precisely want to. Otherwise, you start to ostracize your audience and burn goodwill.
It's
Is that a decent summary?
Yeah, it's a great principle.
Yeah, my reaction to this is kind of a couple of things. The whole concept of a battle pass is obviously a very contemporary, modern, invention. Fortnite popularized it, right? And I can expect, I've purposely not looked at any of the comments because I wanted my thoughts to be my own on this. So I'm going to guess, though, that a lot of the initial reaction is negative, like, don't change my game and that kind of thing. I might be wrong about that, but that's kind of my suspicion. Hera put out a video a couple days ago where he mentioned a couple of things, how he would change the game or some things that need. One of the things that he mentioned is this idea of Age of Empires largely being it's kind of right at nostalgia a lot, and it's got a larger, older, more mature audience, which is a really good thing. There's a lot of pros to that. But also, it is important to develop this to kind of develop the newer audience and to make sure that you're not just resting on your laurels. You're not just resting on, well, this is a legacy game and relive, you know, the 20-year-old game, but how do you keep it fresh and how do you keep it, you know, like you said, put a new coat of paint on that wonderful, beautiful car, right? I see some potential with a battle pass system. One thing for me that would be huge, which if the string indicates this, that's a good thing and why I mentioned it, is there is the implication, like in Fortnite, I don't know if you guys know this, the kind of the founder of battle passes, right? If you don't buy into that battle pass and you're not playing during that 2-month, 3-month period, you lose whatever's in the battle pass. It's just gone forever, right? There are other games out there. Off the top of my head, I know of games like Super Animal Royale and what's the other one? Deceive Inc., where they do this, where they have a battle pass system, but you can buy into old battle passes, and so you never truly lose something if you just took a break from the game for 3 months or whatever. You're not missing out forever on something that you might have really loved to get into. So that's, I think, a very good thing. I'd say if you do a battle pass, you have to find some way of doing that. You can don't ever just permanently lock out, whatever they're going to be introducing into battle passes. I think that'd be a mistake. Certainly reward people for playing it while it's in season, but don't lock people out. I think that would be a mistake. I'm really curious about what they actually put in, because you guys mentioned it, and this is where my mind went too. Regional skins, unit skins. I love that idea. I think that's something that the community has really wanted, is the idea of, the fact that you're playing as the Aztecs or the Japanese, and when you build longswordsmen, they look just like Frank longswordsmen do. That's, for many people, yeah, exactly. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. It would be so much more immersive if there were these regional skins or unit skins. I think a lot of people would welcome that, and for those that wouldn't, for those that are deep into the competitive scene and they're concerned about readability, then you just have that toggle, the on-off switch. Yep. I agree with Jimmy on that one. You've got to have that switch there so that people are locked out. But other than skins, what do you put into a battle pass? I mean, you got to throw in some icons and things, which are like, all right, that's kind of junky. I shouldn't say that, but for me, your little icons, they're not the biggest movers and shakers in the game.
Not at all. Can I throw out some potential options that I'm so sorry to interrupt you. You asked about monetizability. I think there's 3 ways you could do this. 1, new campaigns that you sell by themselves. I think there's a huge single player base who just play the game for the campaigns. And if you have those in your stinky battle pass or whatever, sure, I would love to see them be able to be sold solo. $250 for a campaign? Hell yeah, I think a bunch of people would play that. More importantly, though, this is something I definitely hope they don't lock behind a battle pass, but they might. Added availability in the scenario editor. That, I think, like giving more power to modders, because we have one of the best modding scenes in the RTS market. Like, the only one that I can think of that's better in all of gaming is Warcraft 3. Gmod, I guess, but whatever. And so we have an incredibly powerful scenario editor. Giving people more tools for that, making more mods, is going to make the game live much longer. Warcraft 3 lived until they killed it mercilessly with Reforged.
Right. And actually, if I can jump in, of
course. I interrupted you.
No, because this was the other point I was going to make on exactly what you're talking about. And this would be my concern, and I want to flag this now. My concern is that when companies start to get deeper and deeper into the monetization and you have the battle pass, that you actually, coupled with that, is sometimes companies start inhibiting people's ability to mod.
Yes.
Because you don't want, they see the modder as a competitor to their own product. And so, they're going to somehow limit the ability of the modder guys to do a total overhaul or to do, if you're creating the ability to create unit skins, I want to be able to empower modders to use that tool and not lock them out. That would be my concern, is they're saying, well, we created this, we want to, this is an official product, we want to be able to sell this, so nobody else is allowed to play in the sandbox. And I think in the long run, that would be a very bad thing for the community, for the creative modding community. That was the other big thing I was going to say about the battle pass that I'm worried about. Microsoft, don't do that. Don't do that.
Do not do that.
People will buy your product
Terrible.
regardless. Open that up to the modding community to let them,
Yeah.
take that and run with it. That's a good thing.
If I may jump back in very
Please.
very briefly,
Yep.
this last thing on this topic, I promise. I think something that could work brilliantly. Like I said, modding is longevity. That's going to keep things alive for a long, long time. And one of the best ways to do that is allow modders to monetize and take a cut. Say say a modder makes a total overhaul mod and they want to sell for $10, say, sure, we'll take $3.50.
Mhm.
And that system is going to not only allow modders to really do amazing stuff and encourage and incentivize them to make high quality mods that everyone likes while making a living at it. Maybe not making a living, but making a side hustle at it. But again, it will let people buy into the game to the degree they want to buy into the game. And if a modder says, I don't care about the money, whatever, then don't make them,
Mhm.
If you must, if as a company you're like, oh, well, we really cannot be having this happen without any cut of it, say it's like a 25-cent thing or something. And if it's a popular mod like Small Trees, you'll get plenty. Like, if you make it a very low barrier to entry, so low that you'd have to be a fool not to do it, then that's going to not make people too angry, while also making it so that modding is not a business unviable option, which I think is kind of ludicrous to say, given that mods by themselves were what kept Warcraft 3 alive for
and for that matter,
15 years.
That's what kept Age of Empires 2 alive. The Forgotten started out as an expansion. A lot of the guys working on the game now started out as modders. And so I have hope that they respect the modding side of things. I like the idea of a battle pass. I think it encourages a younger audience that, really are motivated by battle passes, and the fact that I'm earning something while I play, that's considered a really positive thing. That people enjoy that, so that could be fun. Just don't fall into these these pitfalls of either shutting down your modding community or like limiting people. I actually would say, because the battle passes won't expire, you can always go back. I'm assuming that's happening. I don't think that the Civ situation is quite as dangerous as you've put it, because imagine this. Right now, we had the Return of Rome, $15 for various campaigns and scenarios, and then one Civ for AoE2, the Romans. What if instead the Romans, or pick your poison, say the Georgians? I know you guys both have featured the Georgians on your channel.
Shout out to Georgia out there.
What if you had like a $5 or $750 battle pass or whatever, where you kind of started off and you play, and initially you're unlocking a profile icon or a skin for the Teutons or something like that, and then eventually after you play a little bit, you unlock the Georgians.
As long as you can go back, I think that's fine.
I think that'd be okay. But the idea, what would be the worst, is the Georgians are available in a 3-month period, and if you don't buy into this now, you'll never get to see them ever again.
Terrible.
That would be awful. Terrible.
Oh, they could put emotes into them. More like things you can type in, and then you can have something silly. That could be fun. Like the original Spanish theme that they removed. I loved that thing. Just have that be like number 89 or something. The little flamenco guy.
I will say one of the things that maybe is, again, like just Age of Empires 2, other than like Age of Empires 2 and chess, there's I know almost nothing about any other video. I mean, chess I play online too, right. so I'll call it a video game. But if chess isn't a video game, right? Age of Empires 2 is the only one I know anything about.
Wait, you mean that chess doesn't have battle passes, Jimmy?
Yeah, well,
Unlock your second queen.
Not yet.
One of the cool things about chess.com is that now they have AI bots you can play that are supposed to mimic real people. So if you want to go online and play Charlotte Hornets forward Gordon Hayward, he is an AI bot. So anyways, chess.com is fine. They find innovative ways to get people to want to play, which is what I see this too, right? It's Microsoft trying to innovate in some way and follow a playbook, that it sounds like Fortnite does. One of the things, though, I think that to look at it from a different and maybe a more optimistic way is I like the idea that AoE 2 could maybe try to become more of like its own scene. And so like something I think, that has been really great to see is the recurrence of like T90 Titans League, right? I like the idea of, that like of leagues that you can bake a lot of people into, right? So for instance, like talking about tournaments, like there is a whole tournament scene out there that is below the professional level, right?
Mhm.
And something that I thought of earlier in this, and that sort of an analogy, right? Like Kaiser, you're a 1200 player, like I'm, like floating the 1400s, like, like Robbie, like your elo's probably unknown at this time. But the
It
thing
would be
is,
best 1100 at
but
best.
but the thing is though, right? Like I compare it to, to like even think about, like a sort of sports scene where like just because, like, are like a junior college basketball player doesn't mean you're a bad basketball player, right? It means that, like, you've spent a lot of time like honing your skills and doing things like that. And at a minimum, right, maybe you have a love for the game if you're playing like rec park ball in your 30s or something. I think finding a way to somehow incorporate, right, the fact, that the players in this base who are at different levels, and in a way that's maybe like a little bit more centralized. So maybe there are like Microsoft leagues that people can join for the glory of it. And maybe, right, maybe it's not even like a financial incentive, right?
Yeah,
But
pay
like
$5 and enter,
yeah, or even something like, hey, you enter this league and you get this reskin or something. It's not costing you anything or anything like that. But again, like, because like you can try to like monetarily, gain people, right? And that's fine. Like there's a limit to it, of course, but it's fine. But there's also a way to like, keep your player base, and that's one of the things that Age of Empires is kind of tough because it's a game that's been around for a while. So like when I get on the ladder, I play against like other like like 1400 players who they have like 5,000 games in. There are people who've been playing this game for a long time. Somebody who queues up on the ladder who's new to the game, like you're probably going to get shellacked for your first. And I think it's worse now than ever before because everybody starts off at 1,000 elo, and even 1,000 elo players, like what a 1,000 elo player of today is a very different player than 1,000 elo player of just like 3 to 4 years ago, because there's so much content out there. And so I think it would be really good to have venues where we could like it's about keeping the player base that I think you have as well, and having that audience, because if you have a lot of turnover in that audience, right, it doesn't matter how many like paywalls or whatever, like how much you try to monetize them, because they're not going to be a part of the scene and stick around to keep buying that. They're going to play some games, they're going to run through the campaigns and then dip, or they're going to get shellacked on the ladder and be like, I can't keep up with these guys. Like I don't want to take 2 hours out of my day every day to just lose. Like it takes a certain personality to be able to like withstand that and keep going on. And so it'd be great to actually be able to like keep some players.
I love that. That's one of the
I love that idea.
biggest problems I have with Age of Empires 2 is the onboarding for people going into ranked. Because you have to tell people, if you're going to play ranked, expect to lose your first like 5 to 10 games, and you're just going to get beat again and again and again. And then finally, when you dip down to 500 elo or 600 or 7, whatever you are, you dip down to that elo, and then you'll get to start winning. And nobody wants to be a punching bag that many times in a row. There's got to be a better way of bringing people into that multiplayer scene, which is amazing. If you survive that initial beatdown, it's amazing. People, you're going to love playing it, but you got to be able to withstand those first punches, and it's the worst. Something like that could be
and that would be a great way. I mean, even, like in chess.com, an example, like I go online and play chess.com, and like I don't really know what it means, but I know that they even have like a little thing like a wood league or like, you know, like a stone league and stuff like that, right? Like the idea that like, you know, like Microsoft, you know, kind of has these like maybe even like little internal competitions or something like that that are kind of baked into it, but it's all kind of stratified. You know, Harris, since you've mentioned him before, and shout out to him, he did this really cool thing on his channel a few years ago. I think it was around King of the Desert 3 or maybe the King of the Desert 4, where he had like a little tournament thing that he called like Hera Dojo or like Hera Coliseum. And it was just kind of like this, you know, it was like a like putting people into blocks who were of similar elo, letting them play together, and that was just kind of it, you know. And it was pretty popular. Like a lot of my teammates I actually met doing things like Hera Dojo and Hera Coliseum, and so it was all like in good fun. It was essentially kind of, you know, like a just a big training exercise, and and I think it got a decent bit of attention. And so, you know, just kind of some I think that there could be some centralized things like that that would go a long way towards helping keeping people in the game, because you start meeting people in the game, and you know, like we have like clans. I call them teams because I don't know. I just like I think of it that way. But like, you know, like you start talking to people. I mean, you know, we're all talking, right? There's people that jump into, you know, like our discords and like, hey, you know, like I met you here, like, hey, you know, add me on Steam, right? It would be great if there were like more like touch points for moments like that to happen, where there were more times where you would meet people who you would want to add on Steam, you know. Like right now it's maybe it's a little bit too disconnected.
I got a proposal for you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I definitely agree. I think we could have a whole hour-long conversation on all of these sort of social features that AoE badly needs.
Social features is a huge thing, though, for sure. Yeah. The thing I thought is, imagine this: we were talking about like the idea of paid leagues, but if the game detects you're a new player, you've just bought the game, you're booting up, they say, hey, we're running a free new player league. To enter, you must complete the William Wallace learning campaign in the Art of War. That's it. And so if you're like a Smurf who's just rebuying the game, you're not going to play the William Wallace learning campaign in the Art of War just to fight with a bunch of lower level players for no money. Like, you're going to go onto the ladder. So it'd be kind of a way of weeding out people who might just be like, I will prey upon the new people. And hopefully give them an incentive to learn the game, give them an arena to play against matched players, and then send them out into the great world of competitive with a little bit of swag on their name or something like that. You know?
Or even if it's not something where it's like a direct kind of head-to-head thing, like you play in this league to kind of earn points. And then
it could be like team games versus the AI or something like that.
Yeah. And points unlock, you know, like little like skins or like whatever it is you want to do. I mean, like in our team, we do something kind of recurrently, that we have these recurrent improvement cups, and we don't play with each other, but we have a little system set up for where like how much can you increase your elo, your max elo, right? Like in this like 2-month period, or you know, like just how many games you play. Like we have a little point system, and it's just kind of a way to encourage people to, you know, hey, get out on the ladder, you know, take those beatings, right? You know, because the more you take the beatings, right, and all that, like your anxiety drops a little bit and that kind of thing. And so we do that internally. I could see something centrally like that working.
Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. I think we've been talking for a little while, so I've got one last question. All right, that's just going to wrap it up with a fun one here. Off the top of your heads, bonus surprise question. What are your top 3 favorite Civilization icons? The Civ logo. I have
so many opinions.
The Civ logo. What are your top 3 favorite Civ icons in the game? And if you need a second to think about it, can you do 5? Yeah. I'll let you do 5.
Okay, I have a bunch because I put these in my videos all the time. I know all of them. I probably look at the icons more than I actually play the game at this point. Jimmy, do you have ideas? Do you want to jump into it?
You can go first, man. I gotta remember what the icons are.
I got a ton of them, man.
I have a list. I've got my 3 that I put in. And I made sure to write this down before I looked at them. So that's just from memory. I'm going to go before or after you.
I'll fire away
right,
if you want.
First.
I got them. Okay.
I'm really curious to see if we're like on the same.
I have many that I like. I love the Persians. I think that purple is a very underrated color. They're the
Mhm.
only civilization that has purple prominently on their ensign.
I agree.
And I think that the Simur is the name of that like dragon shape, and that's a beautiful motif in Persian iconography. I love the Persian, maybe my favorite. The Koreans, I think that the blue and red simple Taijitu shape, so striking, so clean, gorgeous, very very easy. The Bengalis, I think that the yellow and orange combo is very underrated, and they implement it quite nicely, simple and clean and pretty. And that's three. But okay, if I can
All
do
right.
briefly,
Honorable mentions. Yeah.
honorable mention. The Dravidians. I can't stand the civilization's design in any way, shape, or form, but I love the beautiful teal gems on the shield. Just like it makes my monkey brain go, oh, pretty, and that's good enough for me sometimes. Sometimes I usually overthink things like this though, and then I'll leave it there. That's
All right.
my list.
All right,
Okay,
Jimmy,
I think I
you
could
got
do.
your top three?
I think I can do three. So I would say I think the Magyar's
Ooh,
icon
that's a good one. Yeah.
is pretty clean. It's also like an unusual shape, and I think it's because it's basically like the shield on the Magyar Hussars, right? So I
Yeah,
like the way that
that's called an Ungarischer, by the way. It's a type of
yeah,
shield used specifically in Hungary.
yeah, it's a dope shield, and so like
It is.
it loops on to the unit pretty well. I think the Mongols are cool, and I like the. I think I go with the Huns. I like the horse.
Oh yeah.
It's just like that's what like because I'm like
It's a
that's what the
horse.
Huns are. That's what the Huns are about, So
Right.
I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'd go
Red on
like
black, really striking.
yeah. That's a cool. It's a cool logo. Yeah.
All right. The top three that I had, I picked first the cumin. So I love the mask,
Consider
the
that.
silver and gold. It really stands out among all the Civ icons, and it just that one's a really really nice choice. I guess you got to give shout out to the Khmer too. They do kind of the same thing, but
Yep.
I think the cumins they're like the ones that really stand out to me. Next one, I like the various European shields and icons, and so I wanted to pick one. Now, rewinding back to my old story, when I was growing up, I played nothing but Teutons. They were like I was a Teutons guy, right?
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, but looking back, as much nostalgia as I have, I don't think I can pick the Teutons as the number one European icon. I think the Poles really stand out. There's a really bright, nice white and red combo there. The eagle, it's really colorful and stark. I like it a lot. And then my number three, the Aztec. I think the green and gold works really nice together, and I always, whenever I play and I see the Aztec icon, I get a little smile on my face. I just think it's a really beautiful, pretty little icon. So that's my top three. All right. Let me throw one thing out. I know both of you guys have some personal projects before we sign off that I wanted to spotlight. Really quickly, like 30, 60 seconds. Robbie, I know that you have a project that you are kickstarting. Do you want to tell us anything about that at all?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm a tabletop game designer. I worked as a professional tabletop game host for many years, playing and hosting entirely my own games, and I'm finally getting around to publishing one of them. It's a game called ENCLAVE. It is a TTRPG, diceless, but not mechanics light, that focuses very heavily on acting, player decision making, and rewarding buy-in to the story and player effort writ large. I'm going to be crowdfunding effectively an introduction version to this game. You can learn the game in 3 pages and then take 10 years to master it. I've been hosting it for almost 8 years at this point within my own playgroup, and have clocked probably 20,000 hours into it as a host and designer. It is a labor of love, and it is the thing that really, tabletop games writ large is what started me down in game design, and it will always be my first love in terms of hobbies and passions. So I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter for that August 8th. I have a pre-launch page out now, but I'm going to be promoting it as much as I can when it gets a little bit closer to the date. And you guys can look forward to a cinematic trailer that I'm going to be putting together for it as well. So that's what I have.
That's cool. That is so cool. And Jimmy, I know you have not just your AoE YouTube, but you've also got a music side to you too. And I would love if we had time for like an off topic or like a kind of a outside AoE world. I would love to just sit down and talk about music and like what is that? Because I'm not very musically inclined. But do you want to share a little bit about your musical side?
Sure, yeah. I've been playing. I mean, I have my guitar in the background actually. No, I make music. I make a lot of these days. I make a lot of like lo-fi, chill, kind of ambient sort of things.
Shows up on your
You
channel a
know,
lot. It really gives.
I
You
was
a
gonna
unique
say, yeah,
flair,
you can find. So I release music under the alias of Duke Montrose, just because I don't know, it sounds kind of musical. And Jimmy James kind of doesn't have a very musical sound to it. But uh, but yeah, so I release if you don't go to like Spotify or iTunes or somewhere else, probably one of the best ways to listen to my music is actually in my videos, right? Almost pretty much all my videos over the last year are tracks that that I've produced and written, and so which is it's really easy to avoid copyright claims on background music. I think I was one of the first people on in Age of Empires YouTube to start putting background music in actually. So yeah, that's a good place. And yeah, I still write and release things. I think I'm gonna put out another album at the probably later on in the year. My last one I did was an album called Martian Wave, and back in October of like 2021, I think it was the I think it was the Perseverance of the Curiosity rover sent the first sounds from Mars back to us, and I sent an email to the folks at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was like, hey, I want to make an album that's like built around all these sounds and using them. How do you guys feel about it? And they were like, oh yeah, totally cool. It's all like public domain. It's sweet. So about a year or so later, I put that out, and I think I'm going to keep. I've decided to just keep using them, and there's sort of a follow up that I've planned. So yeah, we can talk later more about it. But that's something I'm working on right now.
That's so
That
cool.
is awesome. That's awesome.
Fantastic.
And guys, I will have links in the description below to both of these fine gentlemen's YouTube channels and their Discords and also these various projects. Enclave,
You're a good
Duke
man.
Montrose. Check them out because they really are some awesome guys, awesome AoE2 content creators, and awesome guests on the Iron Kaiser Gaming channel. Guys, thank you both so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun.
Totally, man. Thank you so much for having me.
I agree. Thanks for having us. And in the comments section, right? I'm really curious. Something you said at the beginning. If you're out there in the comment section, and let us know if you follow, like, if you're like when you watch this video, you're a follower or a subscriber, whatever it's called on YouTube. I don't even know. But whatever it is, right? Like, do you know of all of us? Is this your first time being introduced to like Robbie or myself? Right now, how many of you are hitting the trifecta?
Yeah.
Right. Of like you're
question.
subscribed to all three of our channels, right?
Oh, and would you like to see us do another one of these too?
That's where I was going with this too. I really want to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this, because this is a different thing for the channel, long form, just sitting down, three guys chatting Age of Empires. I love it, but I want to know what do you guys think. So, if you liked this, like the video, subscribe to the channel and all that jazz. And let me know in the comments below, like if you want to see more of this kind of thing, because that would mean a lot. So, thanks, guys. Again, Robbie, Jimmy, thank you both so much. This was a blast.
You're a good man.
Thanks. And with that, this is the Iron Kaiser and friends signing off. Have a great one out there, guys.